most of this cane that I'm getting has already been selected out from one province in China, and they grow it specifically for bamboo rod makers. And this is the best of the best. And one of the first things I do is I'll put a check in it after I get it, so that it can expand and contract. Because I might hang on to this comb for, it could be 10 years before I use it. So by putting this one check in it right here, that'll keep it from getting a bunch of micro splits in it. Some are better than others. It depends what rod I'm making. If I'm making a heavy salmon rod or a real light 7-foot 2-piece trout rod, this one would make a nice 9-foot rod. It's got more power fibers on that outside edge. That's where the power fibers are. They're on the outside edge. Then the very outside is the enamel. And right underneath the enamel are the strongest power fibers. Rods can be 4-sided, 6-sided, 5-sided. Those are the 3 common ones, but they can be anything. As many sides as you want to make it. I've even heard of some 2-sided bamboo rods. Typically, everything I make is a 6-sided rod. Well, a 12-foot calm I can get if everything goes good and it splits the way it's supposed to, and the nodes are pretty good. I can get 2 rods out of a 12-foot calm. Some of these are cut in half, so this would be 1 rod right here. A 2-piece rod. It could be a 2-piece up to 9 foot long. Need a little bit more if you're going to make a 3-piece rod. Bamboo does have the tensile strength of steel. I can't tell you exactly what that means, but so this is the raw bamboo. This is the very start of a bamboo rod. It made its journey from the Tonkin province in China all the way through a container ship to Seattle, and then Seattle, it gets loaded on a truck and a trailer and driven coast to coast, and I'm fortunate enough to get some dropped off to me once in a while when I need it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split this in half, and ultimately for a 2-piece rod I'm going to try to get 10 pieces out of this, out of each half. It splits pretty easy once you get it going. So that's the first half. I would like to try to get minimum of 5 pieces out of here, and I want them about 1/4 inch, something like that. So that'd be 1. I start with that. You can kind of direct the splitting a little bit. Just comes instinctively after a while. I know which way to push and which way to pull to keep that split going the right direction. And I would go down the whole column and flame the whole thing. That's if I was making a flamed rod. But right now we're just gonna keep this one blonde. We're gonna make a blonde rod. After it's split, we got to work the nodes over. So the first thing I'll do is now the power fibers go right through these nodes. So So it's not like the nodes make a weak spot in the rod. But there's quite a bit of work involved in getting these nodes flat. A lot of times the bamboo strip will have a little kink in it right at the node. Well, they're pretty easy to straighten out with a little bit of heat. This is node work, and it can be, depending on the comb and how it splits, it can be a lot of work, or sometimes they'll go pretty good. But we got to get them straight as an arrow this way, and then flat along the enameled side. Bamboo is pretty pliable when you get it warmed up, in that you can give it a little bit of a bend after it's heated, and when it cools off, that's where it's going to be. See, now I can feel it starting to bend. It's heating up pretty good. It's starting to get pliable. If I keep rotating it, it might get a little charred, but it won't. I might even just clamp it in a vise one time. So it's straight that way. Now I'm going to check it with my little straight edge here. Now that node's got a little bump in it right there on the enamel side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat that spot, and now I'm going to press that bump out of it. I'm pretty fortunate to have this workbench here. It's a 2-inch solid marble top with this bullnose edge, and I found all kinds of uses for it. It looks pretty good. 20 strips and 3 or 4 nodes per strip. We're talking about 80 nodes there, 60 to 80 nodes. So this is going to take a couple days. After I got this strip the way I want it, straight and the nodes flattened, I'm going to run it through what I call my beveler. It's called a Baginski beveler, named after Ralph Baginski. He's the one that came up with this idea. And the way my beveler works is it's got 260-degree beveled wheels here that I'll put 40 grit sandpaper on, and as I'll run that through, I have an adjustable anvil on top to push it down into that V, and as it goes through, it's going to give me it's going to turn a square strip into a 60-degree triangular strip. So after the strips are all rough planed and cut to length with a proper node stacker, it's going to end up being a 3x3. So it's 1, 2, 3 nodes alternating all the way around. And after I get that all set up the way I want it, I'm going to bind these strips. So then the next step is to heat treat it. Now, going back to where I was a little at the beginning, if I was going to build a flamed rod with a flame finish, that would be the heat treating. But this has not been heat treated yet, so I'm going to bind it and put it in an oven that I've made, get it up to 350 degrees for about 8 minutes. So this thing is called a Garrison binder. The original design by Everett Garrison, who made probably in the neighborhood of 600 or 700 rods in his lifetime. And they're some of the finest bamboo rods made. There was a book written by Everett Garrison, in the mid-70s, Everett Garrison and Hoagie B. Carmichael. And that book has been used by thousands, tens of thousands of rod makers to help get started. And it still is probably the best book out there if you want to learn from a book about making bamboo rods. That's the one to have. So I'm actually going to wrap this twice. The first time I drove it through here, through the binder, and in one direction, and now I'm going to go the opposite direction and wind thread on it the opposite way. It gives it equal binding forces. And you'll see what I'm talking about there. Those bindings are crisscrossed on there. So the way this binder works is, this is basically a drive belt here. This pulls the sections along, and then this is the binding string that comes in and just gets wrapped around it. The binding string is under a little bit of tension with these tensioners here, and then the drive belt is under tension by a weight that comes through here, and that weight, and then this string just holds it there, the binding string. It isn't really rocket science. People have been doing this since the 1890s, 1880s. This is how bamboo rods have been made for 140 years. So I'm going to cook that now I'm going to cook all 3 sections of the rod I'm making. I'm going to bind them all, get them all at this stage. Then I'm going to cook them in the oven at about 350 degrees. About 8 to 10 minutes. So everybody has their own heating regimen, but that seems to be the one that works for me. All right, so this oven that I made is quite simple. It took a while to get it to work properly, but it's basically a 6-inch stovepipe with a rack inside of it, and then a 1.5 inch exhaust pipe running through it that I call a manifold with holes drilled in the sides. What I use for a heating element is a heat gun. So I'll put it right inside that manifold. It's going to blow heat out uniformly all the way through there. Then I check it with the thermometers. When it gets to 350 degrees, then I'll put the cane in. All right, then we're going to load the strips in there. So I got all the strips in there now. It's at 350 degrees. I'm going to set my timer. Cell phones are great these days. Set timer for 4 minutes. I'm just going to rotate this. Rotate all the strips in here. Now this bamboo is tempered. This form, steel form, has a 60-degree bevel on each piece, which is actually tapered. And it's wider on this end, narrow at this end. And it's adjustable. So I've developed tapers that I like for a 3-weight, 4-weight, and 5-weight rods. and I got numbers, all these numbers, in my secret taper book. Actually, I'll share them with people if they want. So the process of setting the form is using these push-pull points right here, getting the right depth. Each strip on a 6-piece rod represents half the total thickness of the rod, diameter of the rod. I always plane the butt section first. That way, if I need extra strips, I can always turn a butt section strip into a tip section. So my starting point for this one is at 45 inches. The diameter of the rod from flat to flat is 280 thousandths. So I need to set my form at 140 thousandths. My numbers get smaller on the way up until it gets to the ferrule. Let's see, at that point I am 272. There's a lot of measuring when it comes to planing these the final strips and the final taper. 268 stuff. That's the turning point. If you can get a successful glue up, here's our tempered strips ready to plane. So we're going to take the binding off. To our strips is knock the enamel off it. That's going to uniformly scrape the enamel off. But it's still hot. We got the enamel off, and that looks pretty good. That's pretty good looking. So this is a finished tip strip, and it's been hollowed out. If you can get a shot on the hollowing there, it's hollowed out to 35 thousandths of an inch thickness, wall thickness here. We spent a lot of time on preparing the strips and preparing them for the final taper planing. So we showed all that, and that's really what makes a quality bamboo rod. We kind of fast forwarded here now through the hollowing process. You've seen some examples of how the hollowing works that I make my rods with, and the gluing glue that I use is Titebond 3. Never had any failures with it. You need to work a little fast with it, but I had never had any problems with it. I like Titebond 3. It's the same binding process. So after the glue up, the final sanding, then it's time to install the ferrules. This happens to be a three-piece rod with 2 tips. I've already installed the ferrules. I buy my ferrules from a rod maker, Dave Norling Jr., and he's a ferrule supplier, ferrule maker. Does a really nice job. But they'll come a couple thousandths oversized. So then you have to fit them. So you get just the fit you want. So they're snug. So it squeezes together nice and all the way. And then it comes apart with a nice pop. Where we're going to put on the reel seat, a cork handle, and then the guides. We're going to wrap all the guides with silk, and then we're going to dip it and varnish, And in about 20 hours now, we're going to have a finished rod. I made this ahead of time. This is some burrowed maple. The person I'm making this rod for picked out this piece of wood, and he wanted an upblocking. So that's going to go on here. That's going to be the real seat, and a recessed cap here. This is a full wells handle, and then this real seat was fashioned on the lathe also. The hardware started out as just nickel silver plate, and then engrave them. So I got the, and we do a nice little fly line with a fly. This piece of wood is buckthorn. It's actually, buckthorn's a kind of a real interesting wood, besides just being an invasive species. And then this would be a half-well style handle. This is all fashioned. So right now I'm wrapping the ferrule, and I'm using silk. I always use silk. This rod is wrapped, and I'm putting multiple coats of varnish on the wraps. I'll put about 4 coats of varnish on there. There's the hot varnish. So I've made this little clutch system here where I can pull the pin out and it has a reverse on it. If it takes 12 minutes, it must be about 4 inches per minute. Big moment. Yeah, there it is.